Adell, welcome to the show.
So happy to be on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I wanted to have you as a guest on our podcast because you've been someone that I have had the fortune of seeing as a public speaker and motivator and someone who truly does inspire and can transform people's lives. And so the theme of today's episode that I wanted to focus on is the life of a public speaker. And the question that I would like to start off this episode with is from a conversation that you and I had about 2 weeks ago regarding a similar topic. And that is, how did you prepare yourself for being able to charge for your services?
Yeah, that's a subject or a topic, a question that a lot of entrepreneurs have and a lot of people in business have. What should I charge? How much is it worth? How much are people going to pay for what I have to offer? And I had the same, I don't know if you want to call it anxiety or not, but you want to get paid, but you also, you want to know that you can add some value to other people's lives as well. At least that was my perspective on it. And so, what I did was I really was committed to starting at the beginning of a new career.
Mm-hmm.
And so my background is in college athletics. I was a college basketball coach for 14 years. I resigned and left that world totally and wanted to do something different. And full-time public speaking was one of them. And so I had this sense of wanting to pay my dues, so to say. And I actually didn't know what dues were. And, you kind of don't know what a new journey is going to require of you. And so
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was my duty to figure that out. Yeah, you can tell a story, you can speak to people, you can inspire people, but do you know the business of public speaking? And so, I first went on all of my social media sites and really started to gravitate towards the topics of public speaking and people who were offering, free content around that subject, webinars, and anybody, I remember watching a Lisa Nichols webinar. Lisa Nichols, a personal development coach who was featured in the book The Secret by Rhonda Burns, probably well over 20 years ago now. But long story short, I was on one of her free webinars about public speaking, and she talked about pay and how to ask for money and things like that. And she talked about a beginning number. And so she threw out a number of like, $1,200 is a solid beginner's number for an entry level or someone just starting out. And I documented that mentally. And then I would hear someone else talk about just go out there and do the job. You got to get practice as well. So go out and do it.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing, kind of making a long story short here, or longer, I should say, but one thing kind of changed my whole perspective on it, Oleg. And there's a guy named Charlie Jabley. Charlie Jabley was someone I was following on social media. He was the manager for a rapper named Chainz. And he kind of is a background guy for the company. He started his own additional company called CEO, and he had a little clothing apparel line, whatever. Well, he was open to answering questions that people had on social media, on Instagram. He would say, hey, just call my phone. We can set up a free 10-minute consultation, or we can talk about your dreams. If I can help you guys with anything, let me know. This is kind of how he was giving us access, his community, his Instagram community access. So you know what I did? I emailed Charlie and I said, hey, I'd like to get 5 to 10 minutes with you, about what I'm doing in my dreams and what I want to do. And he said, great. I got him on the phone and he kind of shot it to me totally different. He said, you've been a basketball coach and you've watched basketball players come into your program and want to be a star right away.
Mm.
And they haven't yet paid their dues. They haven't been in the gym long enough. They have no idea what the landscape of college athletics is. They don't know how strong they got to be. They don't know anything about endurance. They don't know how to, they have to start at the beginning. And he's like, don't change it up. There's no different. You got to now start at the beginning. You're trying to go into a new career. Well, you don't even have basketball shoes yet. You don't even have a basketball yet. You haven't even invested a second, a hour into doing it. So what you need to do is go speak to as many people as you possibly can, because that's what you want to do. Document it so you have proof of concept. And so he's like, you need to stop overcomplicating it, And so his perspective was totally, different. But I needed that because I was overthinking it. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that you just at some point you got to go do. You can't wait for people to say, I'll pay you this or what should I, because you just sit and do nothing. And
Mm-hmm.
so I decided based on that conversation with Charlie, like I'm going to go out and I'm going to extend um, on my social media platforms that I'll do a free fall tour. Do a fall tour. It's going to be free for the first 30 people that um, get booked, that get on my calendar. And that's how I launched my speaking career. That's how I launched it. 30 free speaking events, and they were great. I was able to stand in front of different audiences, and whether it was male, female, a mixture, older, younger, big groups, small groups, I was able to film it. I was able to get testimonials and feedback. I was able to feel what it's like to be in those rooms and where I need to improve and get better and how I can better articulate this message versus this message. It was kind of like a training camp almost,
Mm-hmm.
an internship. You got to put yourself through an internship and learn about the travel and setting up your own camera and all these other things that go into the whole business of it. And so that conversation with Charlie really kind of changed
Changed
my,
everything.
yeah, it was like, go just get into action, do
Mm-hmm.
something, and then start making decisions off of that. And so that's kind of how I started with the 30 free speaking events. And I think it was great for me. It was
So
great for me.
that's such a powerful perspective because one of the things that I've learned throughout this journey is when I had started as a speaker myself, one of the things that I wanted to focus on was the same exact thing that you just spoke of. Is I believe you have to get to a point where you feel confident with your message, and the only way to develop that confidence is you just have to do it. The more you do it, the
Mm-hmm.
better you get. So one of the questions that I used to get asked at the very beginning was, well, when are you going to start charging? Or how much are you charging? Or did you get paid?
Mm-hmm.
And I know that after a while it became so repetitive that I would just say no, and then just the conversation would end there. And so for
Mm-hmm.
me, it was more so understanding your skills and abilities to a particular point, because when you put a dollar sign onto something like this, when you're delivering a message and actually trying to change a person's life, I believe it should be just like anything else. Just like you're going and ordering a burger at your favorite restaurant.
Right.
You're not going to walk in there and get the burger for free. You still
Mm-hmm.
have to pay for it. So this case, it's not any different. You're delivering a service to someone. Therefore, you've got to have the practice to begin with. And
That's
then you've
right.
got to be able to feel confident that, okay, is my message truly worth X number of dollars?
Mm-hmm.
And then within it, what I've learned is that the more you did that, the free practices in a way from one group to another and changing the audiences, it also helped you craft your pitch as a
Right.
speaker. Because
Right.
just like anything else, when you start off, you don't start off at the top. You don't start off with knowing X, Y, and Z about who you even are or the message
Right.
that you're trying to deliver.
Mm-hmm.
Because during those 30 events, I guarantee that for you, what one of the things that might have happened is your pitch probably shifted from one thing to an entirely different thing. Because
Absolutely.
you were able to see, okay, these are the things that people are actually relating to. This is how I'm
Mm-hmm.
touching them. This is the impact that it's having on them. So, how did you pitch yourself to begin with, if you remember that? And
Yeah.
then, how do you pitch yourself as a speaker now?
Initially, um, I use social media a lot to brand myself. I
Mm-hmm.
consider myself a media brand. I'm not just a public speaker, someone who's going to come and stand in front of you. I'd like for you to be able to get that information also through video on my site. at my website or through a blog or something I've written, or I'm trying to communicate inspiration all the time through any avenue or vehicle I can. So I'm always communicating this message of inspiration. But when I'm pitching initially, it was really a matter of, I'd like to get in front of your group. And I tried to leverage all the relationships I had prior to the environment on a college campus, me being a former college basketball coach, 14 years as a coach on a college campus, but also as an athlete on a college campus. So that's a lot of years and experience with that demographic. So I tried to
Mm-hmm.
go to that space and just talk to them and let them know I know exactly who you are. I know who your kids are. I know who you are as a coach. Allow me the opportunity to share my message with them. I think it may add value to what you're doing. So that was kind of the initial pitch, to really be confident in knowing I have a really good idea of what's happening in your world. I think that's important. For me, it's important to have an
Mm-hmm.
idea of who my audience is. And the better I can know them, the more confident I'm going to be in anything I say and do. My preparation, my delivery, all of it. And that's important early on when you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have been referred and recommended to different groups off a college campus, now corporate America, now wellness conferences, and different audiences are now asking me to come speak. And so um, the main thing that's happening in my pitch now is being able to keep it very simple.
Mm-hmm.
Do you hire speakers? If that's a no, do you know anyone who does? Do
Mm-hmm.
you have any colleagues, any friends, any people in your network that are looking for speakers? Um, if they say yes, then I communicate what my true mission is in regards to my company and my brand. I have two goals. It's quite simple. I want to inspire the world to make adversity their advantage, and I want to challenge people to enlarge their vision of what's possible in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So, with those two things, I can connect with any human being walking. And I can cater it to what they need. And so the pitch becomes about those two things, highlighting those two things. I'd love to share with you a video of my work, and let's have a 15-minute, 10-minute conversation about whether you believe that I can add value to the people you work with or your audience or at your event. And so I didn't have those two components when I initially was pitching early on,
Mm-hmm.
right? I just thought, hey, I used to play basketball. I've coached basketball. I've been in that environment. I know what you guys are going through. I can help. Now it's more of these two things. I'm able to communicate at a level that matters to me, that I believe can be transformative for anyone with ears and a pulse.
That's amazing that you say that, because I think within it the important thing is that you have to start with what you know,
Mm-hmm.
and from there you expand, because one of the things that I've noticed is, especially for speakers who speak on multiple topics, it's very easy to get so overwhelmed and just start shooting. I call it kind of the shotgun approach. You just start shooting at everything and hope that something
Yeah.
sticks. But in your case, what you just said is just start where you are. If you've had any sort of relationship within college athletics, then start
Mm-hmm.
with that network. If it's academics, professors, or whoever it may be, then start
Mm-hmm.
there. If it's something that's related to child welfare services, then start in that field instead of trying to go into an entirely different field, because when you go into a new field, you also have to understand the rules of the game within that field.
That's
You have to
right.
understand how people interact, how they respond to you. In some
Mm-hmm.
fields, you may not get an immediate response. You may get a response a week down the road, a month down the road. And so
Right.
during that time, it kind of goes back to the expectations and what you are used to. You may think, well, no one wants me as a speaker, or I'm not worthy, or I need to go do X, Y, and Z. But really, it's just the customs of the game in that particular field.
Right. Exactly. And all of and you're so right. All of it is different. The audiences are so, and that's one of really exciting things about being a speaker is that no two rooms are the same.
Mm-hmm.
No two rooms are the same. The feedback is different. A 40-year-old woman in the South is receiving it differently than a 20-year-old athlete in the North. I mean, it is so incredible. But you got to be able to navigate that in regards to the speaker coming into that space in that environment, because they are. And I think mastering what you know is essential in any profession.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely what you said is just spot on.
How much do you find yourself of having to pivot when you, let's say, you walk into a room and you've
Mm.
prepared all the time that you can, and then instead of envisioning a room of people who were in their 40s, in transitioning careers or just starting their careers, you have a
Mm-hmm.
room of professionals who are in their 20s.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how do you, the question I have is, first, how do you envision prior to getting into the room? And then
Mm-hmm.
how much of it is actually becomes pivoting as you go? So you step
Yeah.
onto it,
That's.
and because one of the people that I've heard this first from, his name is Gary Vaynerchuk.
Mm-hmm.
And his story, he says he gets on a stage, and the one thing that is constant is that he shares his upbringing, where he's
Yeah.
from, to give people context.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, he just says he just reads the audience. Like if the
Yeah.
audience wants X, Y, and Z, he gives them X, Y, and Z. If they want a
Mm-hmm.
different message, he gives them a different message. But with something like that, there's also a lot of pressure, because what happens if you freeze?
Yeah.
What do you do then? Do you stand on the
Yeah.
stage for 45 minutes and then not say a word?
No, that's a great question. That is a great question. And I'm familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk, and he is a very, while he's consistent in sharing the original story of who he is and his background, he also is very consistent in talking only about what he knows. He's not rambling about, politics, and he doesn't talk about diversity and inclusion. And he is talking about mostly marketing and those things. So he does stay in his wheelhouse.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important. I'm always, no matter what room I'm going into, I'm going to remain in my wheelhouse. I want to talk about making adversity your advantage. And I want to challenge you to enlarge your vision of what's possible. Now, based on the room, that will decide, maybe exactly how that comes across, like what the information looks and sounds like, maybe.
Mm.
But if I have a speech directly for high school kids, that it's so funny you just said that. I just spoke a couple days ago at a high school here in North Carolina, and I booked this about 3 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, on the phone conversation with the point person who secured the me for their event, I know she said like 1,000 kids were going to be there, and so I always like to know, the number of people, obviously, the demographic, age, and most of the time, the person hiring you can get a good feel of what the room is going to look like. But I try to get an idea of the number of people and the age, even race, even gender, and all those things up front. And then that'll give me an idea of what the room's going to look like. Meaning, is it an auditorium? Is it a theater style? Is it a classroom? Is it an event hall like at a hotel? That to me is important for my visualization process. Because if I can
Mm-hmm.
visualize myself executing, and execution for me is that there's a transfer of energy between me and the people I'm talking to that gets them to think about something differently, feel something differently, and ultimately, when we're no longer together, that they act on something that was said. That's the goal. It is not to get all my bullet points in and, I really wanted to say that, but I didn't. I always leave thinking, God, I didn't say that. I wanted to
Mm-hmm.
say that. I should have said that. Or, man, I didn't transition that well enough. So I'm always critiquing the speech. But it's always a win for me if there's a transfer of energy. It's what I'm doing is from my heart, and it's transferred to their heart. that's a win. But the high school, initially they said it was 1,000 kids. So I got, okay, I know it's 1,000 kids, but that was 3 months ago. And I've had several speaking events since then. So now it's the week of, and I kind of check in about 4 days before the event. Hey, just want to confirm the audience size as well as the location. Is it an auditorium? Because that's going to affect filming. Lighting in high school auditoriums isn't that good. So I'm just thinking about all these things, trying to plan. She says 100. And I'm like, oh, okay, 100 people. I feel like that's different than what we discussed, but fine. So I get there and I'm meeting her, talking, and we go into the auditorium. And I said, so we got about 100 kids coming? And she's like, 1,000. I said, okay. And so right immediately, 15 minutes before the kids are going to transition into this auditorium, I go from thinking it's 100 to 1,000. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, okay. And the energy is totally different when there's 100 people in a room and 1,000. Oh, yeah. And so that is, that's what'll happen oftentimes. Somebody may say 1,000 people and only 200 show up. And so you always have to just be prepared for either. But again, the ultimate goal for me is that I pour my heart into it. And I think I said this to you before, but you have what you want to talk about. I have a high school script, a message I want to talk about. It's got the highs, and then I give them a dip, the dip theory, where you talk about your high and then you go into your dip and then you end them on a high, and make them feel like they can relate to that journey. Just take them on a journey. But I always want to leave the door cracked for God to come in, to allow anything that should be in my spirit to be authentic, to be organic, and to be connected and one with the people in the room. For however long I'm in front of them, I always want to allow room for God to come in and just use me as the vehicle to deliver the message as the room needs it, not as I need it, because it's not about me. Once you get in front of people, it's no longer about you. The preparation is about you, the getting ready, getting there, being on time, all those things are about you. But once you get in front of them, it's about them. And if you really deliver it in that way, it's the most rewarding thing. So that's really kind of how I deal with it. I leave room for creativity, for the room to talk to me, to feel. I leave room for all of that.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about so many things that I want to kind of dissect, and that is the very first part of it. You had mentioned the fact of receiving feedback or almost critiquing yourself after each one of the engagements. And the question I have for you is, who are the people that you take information from to begin with? Who are some of the key mentors that you have had and currently have that have kind of paved some of this path for you as a speaker?
Yeah. You know what? I think I try not to overcomplicate it. I try to remember who spoke to me and made me feel better about myself, because that's the goal I have. I want to be able to speak words of inspiration that challenge you to think about yourself in a different way, in a better way. And so I just go back to the people who make me feel good. When I've listened to speeches by former presidents or that move the crowd, and they have a purpose behind it and a conviction behind it, I try to model that. So Martin Luther King is one of my all-time favorites. Every speech was said with a purpose, with a passion. Obviously, his mission was so big. But I love that. I love what a presidential candidate is able to go and do on, at the drop of the hat. And I remember, I was in my late 20s when Barack Obama was running for office. And I just remember all of his speeches. And I remember, there was a behind the scenes documentary, I think, where they were documenting his road to the White House, or whatever you want to call it. I think HBO did it, but it was incredible how they talked about how he, prepared his speeches with his speech writer, obviously, but he never used any note cards. He wanted to be in the moment. And at the time I wasn't a public speaker, but I admired those qualities about someone who could deliver a message in a way that got you to feel better about yourself. And so I start with people who make me feel good about me. So
Mm-hmm.
Les Brown is just the most phenomenal motivational speaker, I believe, ever. His ability to storytell, his ability to be funny, he's entertaining, he's empowering, he's educating you all at the same time. It's like gumbo. I mean, it's so good. And so for me and coaches, I'm a part of a profession in a culture where a coach, his job is to teach you, but also to inspire you to believe greater about who you are. And so I've been around a lot of coaches who are able to communicate in a way, use metaphors to get you to paint that picture more vividly, more clearly, use your imagination. And so when I talk about mentors, I have a lot of public speaking mentors. Anybody who opens their mouth and speaks into my spirit and heart is, when I'm speaking now, that's, people are getting some of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know that was kind of a roundabout way to answer that mentoring question, but the people who influence me are the ones who I am trying to model.
Mm-hmm. And those are some powerful names that you mentioned. One of the first people that I actually started to look into when I began this journey of crafting my message well before I spoke to other people was Martin Luther King. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
I was analyzing I Have a Dream, and I put the entire thing in front of me, and I really dove into what he was using. So the repetition, the
Mm-hmm.
fact that the message was parallel from one paragraph to another, the repetition of certain words within it. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what makes any speech powerful. I mean, when you look at Barack Obama's campaign, I think it was the first one that spoke about the change, and that's one of the things you constantly heard:
Yeah.
change, and we can. And so the more you repeat those
Mm-hmm.
words and those phrases, it actually just becomes part of almost your DNA and your makeup. That's how you begin to think. That's why I always challenge people that the language you use with yourself is extremely critical, because that language translates into all of the relationships that you have from that point on. So
Yeah.
when people get stressed out during the day, this happens to a lot of my friends, and it used to happen to me as well. And it's not because, for example, let's say you have an outburst in the middle of the day. It's not really because of the thing that you just encountered. It started at the very first step of you getting out of bed.
Mm-hmm.
What are the things that you told yourself? What are the things that you repeat to yourself? Because if you get out of bed and the first thing you say is, "Oh God, I can't believe I have 50 things and I don't have enough time to do this." Well, you've already
Right.
lost. You've
Yeah.
already lost to begin with. So if you reverse that and you wake up and you say, "I have 50 things, I have this many hours to do this, I can do this." That's
Mm-hmm.
the motivation. Those are the steps you take. So in regard to listening to other speakers and understanding their message, it's so important to put yourself in that environment that you can really excel in. And I know one of the things that Gary, I believe, used to say and still does is you have to be able to say no to people who are not helping you elevate.
That's for sure.
And it's sometimes it's the hardest thing to do, because how could you say no to someone who is your mom or
Yeah.
your dad or the best friend that you've had for 20 years? But somehow, and I think what he means by that is you don't you don't say no as far as completely push them away. You just say no to the elements that you don't want to be around. So if it's
Yes.
the negative talk, or if it's criticism, or if it's other forms of negativity, then those are the things you actively choose to not be around. But it's a hard thing to say. And the other question I have for you is, when you see yourself in those situations, how do you say no? And do you try and almost rephrase part of that message to that person, saying, why do you say this? Or what if you said something instead of that? Do you try and correct them and help them grow, essentially?
Um, yeah, that's a good question. I think the most important thing for anyone is to make sure everyone who is in their circle, family circle, friend circle, work circle, network in general, knows that they're on a mission.
Mm.
And I think when it's very clear, that Adell is trying to become an incredible basketball player, an incredible basketball coach, an incredible public speaker, then you've created an image and an identity of who you are. And people around you will, most of them, I believe, will get it.
Mm-hmm.
They will either champion you in that, um, or they will just try to support you in a way and be neutral. Or some people, they will kind of weed themselves out, and you will realize they don't belong on this part of your journey. So I think that's really important. I would just make sure, um, if you're getting out of bed, why are you getting out of bed today? Like, I'm getting out of bed and I have a mission. My goal is to build a company that helps inspire the world to make adversity their advantage and challenges people to enlarge their vision of what's possible. How can I best do that? And it's important that everyone who comes in contact with me knows that that's the mission I'm on. And that could, there could be layers to it. Somebody wants to be an incredible wife or husband or incredible mother, or whatever your mission is. I think as many people understand that about you and who you are,
Mm-hmm.
then they have something that they can view and respect.
Mm.
I think that makes it easier. But I also think, on the contrary, you will have people, it's just the nature of it, you will have people who don't get it. They may
Mm-hmm.
not get it in the first 2 years. They may not get it in the first 3 years. They may not get it in the first 10 years. But if you stay consistent on your mission and your journey, at some point, if they love you, they will get it and they will say, oh, okay, this is what this was about.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is what you were doing. This is what you were talking about. I didn't see it then. And again, that's why we're all uniquely gifted and talented with our own vision of what we want. And if we're the only ones responsible for seeing and honoring our vision.
Yeah.
That's why God gave it to us. He didn't give it to your mom. He didn't give it to your dad. He didn't give it to anyone else. He gave it to you. And your job is to honor it and bring it to reality. You're the source to bring it to reality. And I think, sometimes you may have friends who have a hard time being positive or viewing life in that way. And I don't have any issues with that if it's not, if it's 20% of the time or 25, 30% of the time. I don't have issues being the person in the group that says, look, you're capable of doing more.
Mm-hmm.
How about you decide that you're going to wake up and appreciate all the things that are great about your life? Gratitude is a very empowering energy. It's the source for us to renew what we love about whatever's next. Having our goals in front of us and reminding ourselves of what mission we're on. I try to be around other dreamers. I try to surround myself by people who are also on a mission, because
Mm-hmm.
that way we can kind of feed and build each other up. And it's not like you're pulling people. My job is not to pull people. My job is to offer what I have, and hopefully your job is to offer something to me as well. And so we have a kind of give and take relationship of investing in deposits and withdrawals and things like that. So I think just being very clear that you're on a mission would be the first thing I would tell anyone. People have to look at you and say, you know what, that's the person who's trying to do something.
Mm-hmm.
That guy's different. That girl's different. She don't do what we do. And I think that's step number one.
That's powerful. No, I completely agree with that. I think what sounds like what you just said is really just defining the role, not only for yourself, but for other people, and letting them know where you're going, because then that's how you develop mutual respect. That's how people
Mm-hmm.
begin to understand, okay, she is in this position, therefore she may not want to hear certain things when it comes to politics or when it comes to other areas, or
Mm-hmm.
may not want to be exposed to environments that are only about negative talk. So you're spot on with that. I think the better you can get with your message and the more
Mm-hmm.
clear it is and the more obvious, I think that's really the biggest part, is making the message so it's obvious to other people. Like you
Yeah.
said earlier on in this episode, don't overcomplicate things. Simplify it as much as you
Mm-hmm.
can. So if you come
Yeah.
off into a room of X number of people, let your presence guide that whole interaction from that point on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The other part of the other question I had, which relates to an earlier thing that you were talking about, it was preparing the room and making sure that you deliver and the audience really gets the most out of it, is how do you become more efficient with your work? Because I know that when you started off, one of the things that you and I spoke of was, how do you take care of the roles that you need the most? So how do you almost juggle the role of a videographer and a content creator when you may not have the skill set of someone who is so excelled in those fields? So
Mm-hmm.
what did you find yourself doing in making some of those pivots to fulfill those two roles in addition to others that other people can replicate, so when they're starting off their careers right now, they're not looking at them as impossible tasks and saying, okay, well, I don't have someone to walk around with me 24/7 and record everything that I'm doing, therefore I
Right.
can't start. But
Right.
you're someone that did it. And in your case, yes, there was someone with you 24/7, and that is yourself.
Right. Right.
Everywhere you
Right.
go, everything you do, it's just it. How did you get to that point where you realize, okay, even though I may not have another person to fulfill these roles, I can still do
Mhm.
this?
Yeah. I mean, some all of us have all of us have within us kind of the thing that something we're comfortable with, something we're not comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
I have been a performer all my life, as I've been a basketball player and I've been a coach. So everything I've really done most of my life, people have come to watch me do it. So I don't have a problem performing. And so I tie that into being on camera. I didn't have a problem with that. It made sense to me. The best way to market what I do is to video it, is to document it, is to make use of Instagram stories and make use of the 60-second videos and post them on Facebook. That just made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a huge fan of watching other people entertain or inspire or teach or sell or whatever they're doing in their world. I'm a huge fan of it. That's where the world's going. So that made sense, and it was almost like, you can't not do that part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I also say it's not easy for a lot of people. A lot of people are intimidated by that part of it, getting in front of the camera and filming themselves and sharing their 60-second stories. And some people aren't as comfortable. And so I recognize that as an advantage for me in my background and my foundation. I need to use that as a leverage. I'm fine being in front of the camera. So one of the first things I did was bought a camera
Mm.
and started sharing stories. Bought me a camera, I bought a tripod, and I start filming myself in my house and posting it to YouTube and creating a YouTube channel to start sharing these stories or sharing messages of inspiration. Again, trying to brand myself as a full media company and not just I do one thing, because every 60 seconds you get in front of a camera and you start inspiring people that you don't know who's going to see it, you get better at that thing.
Oh yeah.
Or if you're not inspiring, let's just say you speak on marketing, or you're speaking about how to sell cars or whatever you're doing. The more you do it, the better you're getting at it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got myself in front of a camera as much as possible. And I filmed a lot of things from my living room, via my iPhone, but also with my camera. And every time I traveled to for those 30 free events, I'm always packing my tripod and my camera with me. I set it up, I record, and I kind of document it on my own, and I clip it up. I download it into my MacBook. I use iMovie, and I make short clips and films of me doing the work. And now I have social proof, and I'm using my social media pages as a way to distribute to other people. Oh yeah, okay, so she was over at that school. I had so many people contact me because they saw me at another university speaking to another team, or they saw me at another event, and they're intrigued now.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're curious, and they get an idea for 60 seconds or 2 minutes, however I decide to make the clip, of what kind of value I can add. And so I think you got to decide to do it, but oftentimes it's going to be, we always gravitate towards what makes us most comfortable. And that camera thing, I've realized just from communicating with other entrepreneurs and other people who are trying to sell a product via video, or sell their message or share it via video, are very, I don't want to be on camera. I don't like that. And so for me, it was like, well, let's leverage your ability in all the years that you have been on camera, because it's a very common place for me. So that just made sense.
What are some things that you try and capture at the end of every single speaking engagement? I know previously, and one of the things that I was able to see through your social media as well is a testimonial from a person, I believe it was at the high school, that you gave a speech at, and it was so powerful to see another person and to see their life change and be able to have the desire on their own to share a message like that about your ability to speak. So do you kind of have a checklist as far as the things that you want to get afterwards, such as written testimonial on LinkedIn, video recording of the person that helped you get the speaking, or someone from the audience? Like what do you do, and what can other people do as well as they're getting more and more practice with this?
I think that is a great question, and I am still trying to improve. I don't do a good enough job of that, what you just said. I heard there's a guy named Benji Bruce. I don't know if you've ever heard of him before.
No.
Like Benji Bruce. So he teaches about this topic of public speaking. He has tons of content on YouTube. It is worth it for anyone to go and listen or watch his YouTube channel. He also offers some sort of speakers academy type of deal where there's a fee for it, but there's a lot of free content out there he's already done that can really, really help improve anybody's speaking business without paying for it. But one of the things that, he talks about a list of things you want to get right away. And I don't do a good enough job of it. I do email. One of the things I consistently do, I do a follow-up email immediately after the event. I have 5 questions. What was your biggest takeaway? What do you wish we had more time for? What would you like to add or take out, something like that. And do you know of anyone else that may benefit from this message? So I kind of ask for a referral, and I ask for some feedback immediately. I should always have a camera in hand after. This is where an additional person would help me out a lot, because I don't want to, I'm struggling. I don't want someone to come to me, especially a young person, tears in their eyes or very, very moved and in the moment, and they want to have a moment with me. And I say, Connect. hold on, let me pull out my camera real quick and film this, But I do recall Benji Bruce, the guy I'm talking about, was saying you should have your phone in your pocket the whole time and just pull the camera out and push record in the middle of them talking. Don't even ask for it, because it's your business. And technically, if they're speaking to you about a message you've given them, they're giving you your feedback and helping your business. They're talking to the business. I just haven't gotten comfortable enough yet to do that consistently, but I need to do a better job of it, because I'm missing moments that could help me grow my business. And I'm missing moments that could help my own confidence. What that lady said, what you're referring to, what she said to me, people have said before in a different way, but I've never been able to hear it again and again and again and go back
Mm-hmm.
to it again. And being able to remind yourself sometimes, because the speaking business, I mean, it's like a lot of entrepreneurs. It's not a 9 to 5. It's not 5 days a week. It's not,
Correct.
I'm speaking once a week or once every 2 weeks, or now I have a cluster of speaking events in the time span of 2 days. I mean, it's so, it's so, the space and gaps in between my events and when I get to stand in front of people, they're so, it's so unique. I'm kind of getting used to it now, but I'm not in that environment all the time. And so as much as I can remind myself, okay, this is what, this is what you bring to the table.
Uh-huh.
That's significant. That's important. So I need to do a better job. So what you should do when you get off the stage is you should definitely send a email questionnaire immediately after, asking for feedback about how you did, but also asking for referrals. Um, I think the LinkedIn written testimonial is an incredible idea. I need to implement that immediately because I'm not doing a good enough job on LinkedIn, that social media platform.
Mm-hmm.
The videoing part, I would pull my iPhone out immediately, and I try to get some selfies and pictures, but I need to do a better job of video. And so I think if you can get that video, that's the most influential way to share what is actually happening, is video. And yes, that definitely should be on your post speaking to-do list.
Mm-hmm. Final thought for today's episode, and that is, who are you grateful for and why?
It's a great question. Who? I mean, I can't even put that into one one word, but I will say this, Oleg, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for your mission, the passion you have behind it. Um, I'm grateful that at some point in your journey, when you came to this country from Russia, that you didn't quit. You didn't get so frustrated that you wanted to not shine your light. I think the fact that you made a decision to continue to persist and shine your light, and now you're growing and becoming the type of individual that the world is going to see that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an incredible example that you're setting, not just for me, but for everyone you come in contact with. And so I'm grateful that we've been able to connect on your platform, your podcast initially when we first met, and then had an opportunity to share so many other moments between now and then, and that our relationship continues to grow. So I'm grateful for you and your mission and who you are.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Well, Adell, thank you for sharing all this wisdom and the knowledge when it comes to the public speaking world. I know for a fact that I've learned a lot throughout this, as far as just even the details of how you get started, and how you determine the price, and when to determine the price, and why you shouldn't start with certain things where I think the society wants you to start. So it really was not only inspirational, but this is the information that's needed. These are the
Yes.
messages that you have to hear. This is what it's actually like to live in the world as someone who is actively pursuing and trying to create. And like you said, this is not a 9 to 5 job. This is a 24-hour grind. I mean, it's one
Yeah.
of those times where there's no blueprint to this, and every single person's experience is so different.
Mm-hmm.
You can poll 10 different speakers and ask them one question: how did you get that first speaking gig? You're gonna get 10 different answers.
That's right.
So there's no blueprint to this. So I appreciate you sharing this, and being so honest and transparent about the things that didn't work out when you first started this, and the things that you're able to build right now.